Fala turma, Marcos Abreu, aqui do Vaca Brava Rock, e estou aqui ao lado do meu grande amigo Maurício Peccin, e vamos entrevistar hoje um dos maiores saxofonistas de todos os tempos, Scott Page. Vem com a gente. Come on, Scott. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me on your show. This is actually, it's really nice to be on an international show over there. So where are you exactly right now? Where are you?
Marcos, ele está perguntando de onde nós estamos, eu vou responder. Scott, hello. Marcos is in Goiânia. Goiânia is like in the middle of Brazil, like, I don't know, in the heart of the country.
Got it.
And I am in São Paulo. Have you ever been to Brazil?
I've been to São Paulo, yes. So, yeah, years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Years and years ago. Yeah.
That's great. I'm in the countryside.
Yeah, it was back in the 80s. But yeah, the countryside. Yeah, so you're out in the countryside there. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Marcos introduced you as one of the greatest saxophonists out there, and I agree with him.
Thank you. You're too kind,
Yes,
man.
yes.
That's actually a little... You're very, very, very kind. I know a lot of great saxophone players, and you know, ones that I wouldn't even want to take my saxophone out of the case next to. There's so many great saxophone players, but thank you very much. That's very kind.
No, you're a legend, man.
Ô, Maurício, agora vamos começar falando com ele, que ele teve uma participação fantástica no Pink Floyd, no álbum Delicate Sound of Thunder, foi algo extraordinário, grandioso na banda, e a participação dele também foi grandiosa. Mas vamos começar do início, como é que a música surgiu na vida dele, né? Vamos lá.
Well, Scott, we're obviously going to ask you afterwards about Delicate Sound of Thunder and stuff like that. But to begin with, how did you start in music? What brought you to, I don't know, composing, playing the sax? What made you a musician?
All right, interesting. Yeah, so my father was a musician. Yeah, he played 14 instruments. He was and I grew up on a television show that he was in the band called the Lawrence Welk Show. And Lawrence Welk was which is today, I think it's considered, I could be wrong, but I believe it's still running on television. It's the longest running television show, one of the longest, if not the longest running in history, still running. It was a variety television show back in the day. My dad was in that band. So I grew up around the music business and going to the studios with my dad all the time. And I played on that show, the Lawrence Welk Show back in the day. For folks, maybe not over in your part of the world, but over here in the U.S., there was only 7 shows on TV back in the day. So 7 shows, and those 7 shows, this is one of those. Every week it was a variety show. So my dad got me into the music business. My dad was also a serial entrepreneur. We had boat businesses, lighting businesses, candy businesses, and all that kind of stuff. And so that's really where I got my love of starting to get into the music business. And my love of thinking about business, because that's been my career has been a combination of music and actually building business together. But what really got me into the music business was I played trumpet through high school, all the way through junior high school and high school. And I was actually, I didn't care to be, I was studying to be an architect. So I didn't even want to be a musician. I only played the trumpet because my father told me it's a good thing to do on the weekend. You can play your instrument, right? And instead of working in a gas station, make a few bucks, and do that. So I kind of did it for him. And then when I got into high school, I got into a band with Jeff Beccaro and David Page, who were the guys that became Toto. Toto became that band. He had a kid band called the Merciful Soul Band. And I was the second trumpet player in the band. And it was like think of it like Blood, Sweat, and Tears Chicago style band. It was a horn band. And I played the second trumpet. I was the worst guy in the band at that time. Terrible. But then as an architect, I was studying to be an architect. I was a draftsman, and I was working for this company after hours. drawing exploded views and drafting, doing all this stuff with pencils and pens and drawing all these parts, right? Well, then we started playing all these gigs with the Merciful Soul Band, and we started winning all the Battle of the Bands. And the main thing I saw was in that front row, there were a lot of girls.
Oh.
And I said, I'm going to be a musician.
That's what I want.
Sitting in that band, it made me realize there were girls there. It was much better because I was sitting in this room drawing all day, drinking coffee. And I thought, no, this is much more fun. So that really got me into the music. So then I started to study like wholeheartedly because I wasn't a very good musician.
There was no competition. Architecture wouldn't bring you girls, man.
No deal. So I wasn't very good, so I had to study. So I started studying with teachers privately and just really ate, drink, sleep, music 24/7 every day, just practicing, studying with teachers. And during that time, I became a music copyist. And a music copyist was when a composer would write a film score, and then he would hand the score to a guy like me, a copyist, and I would write out the first trumpet part, I'd write out the second trumpet part, I'd write out the orchestra so they could pass the parts out. So that's how I made a living as a musician there for a while, doing that because I had a good hand because of my drafting skills. So I used that to support myself, and then the rest is history. I became a musician.
That's amazing. I'm gonna tell Marcos a bit about it.
Okay.
Maurício, deu para entender. Eu acho que ele, quando ele era criança, o pai dele era músico. Então ele já foi na TV com o pai, não foi isso?
O pai tocava num show que era muito longo e incentivava ele a tocar trompete. Ele não era tanto assim, era meio de fim de semana, até que começou a ficar sério, e aí ele descobriu que tinha as garotas, mas... E aí falou, bom, isso é mais legal que a arquitetura, mas...
Como é que não entra nessa, né? Que legal. Ele era amigo de infância dos caras do Toto?
Were you mentioned that you met the guys from Toto when you were teenagers like that?
Yeah, we were kids, and so I was in a kid band, excuse me, with those guys, and we were playing around town, and like I said, we were winning battles of the bands, and it was a really good band. I mean, Jeff was a monster drummer, even as a kid. He was like 14 years old, and he played great. And David Page was, another great composer, kind of a range guy that was growing up. And both their fathers were really world-class musicians, some of the top studio musicians. David Page's father, Marty Page, was one of the top string and orchestra arrangers in Los Angeles, doing film, television, live Broadway, all that kind of stuff. And then Joe Porcaro, Jeff's father, was a drummer, percussionist, and was playing percussion in all the studios and all of that stuff. And they actually knew my dad. So it was like a kid band made up of all the kids of fathers were musicians and we were kids, right?
Amazing. Sim, eles eram amigos de infância e começaram a tocar na adolescência. O batera do Toto já era um monstro com 14 anos e todo mundo era filhos de pais também world class, uma coisa impressionante mesmo.
Né, tal. Agora, mesmo sendo amigo dos caras do Toto, parece que ele começou no Supertramp, né? Como é que foi isso, assim?
Yeah, Marcus is asking, because you knew the guys from Toto since like childhood, but you started actually at Supertramp, right?
Well, no, I played with Supertramp. Well, remember, what happened so I was not that good of a musician. And so David Page and Jeff, they took off, right? Jeff went over and started doing the Sonny and Cher show. Then they started doing, as a group, they did Boz Scaggs, and they were like already studio guys. And I was horrible. Right, I was trying to learn how to play
second drummer.
Yeah, so it was funny because that always stuck in my mind. I saw my friends take off, and I was like, "Oh, I want to be there." So Jeff, in my mind, was always in the back of my mind to want to get to be good enough to kind of be recognized in that group of musicians because they were the top musicians.
Yeah,
and so I was. It was lucky enough that I ended up getting some gigs on the way up. I did Seals and Crofts, and then I did Supertramp. I got in Supertramp, and then from Supertramp, then I got into Toto. Then I got the call to go play with Toto, and I'll never forget that. I was so excited, but I was also really scared, right?
Hmm.
And it's kind of a funny story because what happened was, so when I got the call, then I started studying the music. I practiced that music 12, 14 hours a day for like
Yeah.
2 weeks or 3 weeks because I knew that we were going to get into rehearsals. So I made sure I learned the music and had it all down. I was really ready because I wanted to go in there. These are my gurus. These are my friends, right? And they were
Yeah.
like, now I finally got to a point where my music career I was able to get called. So that was like one of the most scariest things. So I get up and I go to the rehearsal the first day and I'm all ready to go and play.
Yeah.
And the first thing that happened is the first thing Jeff handed me the cowbell.
Oh, the cowbell.
He made me play the cowbell before he made me play the music. He
They
said, and
remembered you back
luckily,
then.
and because I used to be a student of the groove, I had one of I eat, drink, sleep a metronome, right? I mean, always played with metronomes. I had one
Hmm.
of the first Lynn drum machines when drum machines came out. Man, I got one of the very first one of those that came out. And so time is something that's really important to me. And so when he handed me that cowbell and he said, okay, counted the song off, he wanted me to play the groove. He wanted to see if I could swing, right?
Okay.
I could rock, right? If I could lock in with him. And so I'll never forget that. I had to play cowbell on that song. And it's funny because people ask me, they go, well, playing with Toto, man, because, they're world-class musicians. Those
Yeah.
guys, they're like real serious players, music guys, very educated, but yet also have a sense of rawness that they can bring to the party. It's a very interesting band. And somebody said, well, what was the best thing about playing with Toto? I said, well, here's the deal. Here was the stage, and then here was Jeff on a riser, and then I was on the riser next to Jeff that was up a
Hmm.
little bit higher, and I looked down at Jeff sitting in that thing, right? And
Hmm.
so they said, what was the best thing about it? And I said, I got to play cowbell with Toto and Jeff Beccaro on 4 songs. Because to play with Jeff Beccaro, who was truly one of the greatest groove masters of all time. I mean, his feel and the way he played, I mean, to this day, he's still so legendary, right?
Yeah, he's smooth.
That was a big deal. I'm sorry.
No, he's very smooth, right?
Oh yeah, just his time was so good. So I
Yeah.
would have to and we would lock eyes, man. Me and Jeff, we would just sit there. I would just lock into that groove, and you don't hit he doesn't hit the drum or you don't hit it. You feel the stick sink into
Yeah.
the freaking thing. There's that dead air that happens before. And boy, we locked in. When that thing locked in, it was like,
It's magic. It's
like
magic.
magic. And so that was like heaven for me. I used to say it's better than sex because it's just like this thing would happen. And so it was so fascinating because he would take the beat, right? And where he laid the backbeat, sometimes he would lay it a little behind, sometimes he'd push it a little bit ahead. And so it was really interesting to lock in with him every night and learn. I learned a ton just from that
That-
experience because that became my mantra to understand time better and really his whole thing. So yeah, anyway, Jeb, that was a great band. I love those guys dearly. And yeah, it was a very exciting, that was a big moment for me because just from hey, I made it.
yeah.
I
That's
finally got,
like
I was still probably the worst guy in that band though. I can tell you that.
it's the
Even at that
redemption.
point.
It's the redemption call. Yeah. Oh, okay, man. We want you now. Oh God.
I got to go. Oh, it was so good. I was so thankful. And the other thing is then after that, I'll never forget, those guys came to a Pink Floyd show when we played the Coliseum, right? And they
Hmm.
hadn't seen, here, these are my buddies and stuff, and they hadn't seen. So that night I remember specifically because there was in the stands, there was Jeff Beccaro sitting next to Timothy Leary, and who was it? It was either Paul McCartney or I forget what the other, but it was like some major guy, and they were all there that night, right? And so I remember that was like I was that was nervous playing that night because
That's great.
my brothers were there and the rest of the Toto guys and stuff. And it was
Great. I'm gonna position Marcus a bit, but just let me share something.
Yeah.
Recently I moved back to my hometown, and I moved 20 years ago and kicked asses and took names and did all my stuff. But when I came back to my hometown, I was still, that guy, he's super that. And we have that thing from our childhood, like idols, right?
Yeah. Well, that was it. Again, these are my idols, my heroes, the people that made me. I mean, when I look back in my life now, I can actually say Jeff Porcaro became one of the most important people in my life because he gave me a drive, like a reason to get up and practice every day. I wanted because I love the guy. I mean, we used to go play casuals when we were a kid. I had this old 57 Porsche back in high school. And then a long story how I got that was crazy. But we used to pull the seats out of it and Jeff would get in the back of the Porsche and we'd put all his drums on top of him. We'd fill it up and we'd go play gigs. So that's how much I knew him. He was like my pal. And so they were such good musicians, and to, just at least get to that point that I was asked to come play was one of those accomplishments. Right. And, but, I still wish I could play like those guys.
Amazing stuff, man. Marcos, ele falou bastante aqui. Como que era? Ele era amigo dos caras, mas ele era o pior cara da banda quando eles tocavam, ele falou, né? E aí foi tocar outras coisas e tocou com o Supertramp e tal, até que os caras chamaram ele. Foi tipo o momento da redenção, assim, que era os ídolos dele, os heróis dele, né? Só que...
Ele fez percussão, né, no Toto.
Então, o cowbell, né, o Jeff Beccaro, falou, não, você vai tocar o cowbell pra gente ver se a gente entra em sincronia, depois a gente vê outras coisas. E disse que foi incrível, teve esse show no Coliseu com o Pink Floyd com o Jeff, o Paul McCartney, uma galera lá, ele só olhava e falava, isso é muito bom.
Tipo assim, ficou impressionado de estar ali, né, e você até falou que depois voltou pra casa como um herói, né, ter conhecido a galera toda.
Eu comentei o seguinte, que essa sensação dele de tocar com os caras do Toto é mais ou menos como voltar para minha cidade natal aqui. A gente vê aquelas figuras que eram impressionantes, né? Sim. E a gente já tá grande, já fez muita coisa, mas quando você volta pro lugar onde você tem os caras que você sabe que são bons nas coisas, você fala, nossa, eu preciso tomar cuidado para falar com esse cara, tal.
Então vamos lá, vamos voltar pro Scott Page, a gente tem uns 40 minutos com ele. Vamos. No Pink Floyd, ele era muito instrumentista. Ele tocava guitarra, sax e tocava, né, enfim, muito instrumentista. Ele tinha essa característica também com Toto e com Supertramp?
Okay, Scott Marcus is asking, at Pink Floyd you played like many instruments, the sax, the guitar, and pretty much everything, right?
I played just sax and guitar on that. On
mostly
sax and guitar, but I had several saxes. I played some baritone sax, some alto, and mostly tenor. But yeah, that was it. And soprano. So I played all. That's right. I played soprano, alto, tenor, and baritone saxophone on that.
Ok. Ele tá falando que na verdade era guitarra, só que eram vários tipos de saxofone, mas eram só os dois. Não era multi-instrumentista, que eram vários sax diferentes.
Entendi. Bom, então agora vamos um pouco para Pink Floyd, né, e tudo. Quando ele entrou para Pink Floyd, segundo ele não conhecia a banda. Né, eu vi uma entrevista anterior dele, não conhecia a banda. Então ele teve que ir lá comprar disco dos caras. Eu queria saber qual foi a impressão dele na hora que ele teve que se concentrar ali e pensar, putz, como é que é a sonoridade desses caras? Qual foi a impressão dele ao ter essa imersão ali ouvindo Pink Floyd?
Ok. It's a famous story that when you were called for Pink Floyd, you didn't know the band, right?
Yeah, that was really funny, actually.
Yeah,
I know. It's so interesting because I was playing with Supertramp at the time, right? And, as a saxophone player, I was listening to saxophone players and bands that used a lot of saxophones. Mostly that kind of psychedelic rock kind of, or that type of music. It's not really the place you go as a saxophone player to listen to, right? So I was heavily into everything from, from James Brown, and I was listening to guys like Junior Walker and Hank Crawford, and, all these great saxophone players and stuff. So I didn't really know anything about Pink Floyd. So when Dave Gilmour came to play on a Supertramp record while we were in the midst of making the record, right? And that's how I got to know Dave. And from that, we went to this event that I produced when I had this whole big giant band. It was, I had Jeff Baccar, I had all the Toto guys, Supertramp guys, Tower of Power horns. I had this massive band, like this crazy thing. All these incredible musicians did this event. Gilmour came to that, saw me play and really kind of do my thing there that night, called me up the next day to come play and put some solos on the Pink Floyd record. So I went to I went to the studio and I went and played on the record, and there's a whole thing about that too. That's just another long story about what went down there, but went and played on the record, and the next couple days later he calls me back and said, boy, we loved what you did on the record, and we're going to go out. Would you be interested in joining the band? And I had just finished doing that recording thing that he came to see, which was my event. It was called The First Dance. It was a whole project using zooming microphones and all this stuff. So I'm kind of an inventor with sound and picture back then. So it was my own project. So I was in the middle of that, just shot that. And so I said, well, let me think about it. So I said, hey, Dave, let me think if I'll do this, right? So I called my friend up and I said, hey, Danny. I said, dude, I said, I got this call. I went and I played on this Pink Floyd record. He says, you did what? You played on a Pink Floyd record? I said, yeah, I played on a Pink Floyd record. I went and put some solos on this record, right? He says, wow, that's cool. And then he says, I said, yeah. And then I got a call from the guitar player, and he says, Dave Gilmour called you? I said, yeah, Dave Gilmour. That's right, Dave Gilmour, the guitar player. He called me, and he wants me to join the band. He says, he wants you to what? Get the band. I said, yeah. I said, I got called, and they're going out because Dave said the first tour, we're going out for 2 years. So that was like a big commitment when you're going to say you're going to go on the road. You're going away for 2 years. It's not like, oh, this is 3 months, 6 months. This is 2 years of your life. And like, oh my God. I said, but dude, I don't know anything about this band. I said to him, all I remember is, I remember there was a song called Have a Cigar. I remember that at that time. I could remember there was a song, and that's all I really knew about these guys, right? So I went and he told me all these albums, go get these records, man. So I went to Tower Records that night, and that was open 24 hours a day. It was a record store in the United States here, open 24/7. And I went and got some Pink Floyd records because there was, it wasn't tapes, and it was actually that kind of stuff. And I listened to the records, and then I decided, okay, I called him up and I said, I'll do it. And boy, am I glad I did.
I have a picture in my head, like you say, oh, the drummer is a bit sloppy, and I don't know, this guitar man just plays very slowly.
Well, it's a whole different thing. Oh my God, yeah. It was because again, I just got off of playing, with all these like, I'm playing with Jeff and Jim Keltner and all these incredible, like crazy drummers, and didn't really understand that music at the time. And I didn't quite understand it at first, but now I'm the biggest fan on the planet, right?
Oh, and Wright is a very, he plays very odd times, right? It's very hard to link with him.
It's more about the feel. And it's actually funny because, while we were out, we'd do our sound checks, right? We did 199 shows that period of time. And we would do our sound checks, and drummers, and we'd be in towns, and famous musicians would show up to come to or hang out with us. Friends of Gilmour's and Rick's, and friends of the Floyd band, and our friends and people we knew when you're in New York and whatever. And so we would have these different musicians, and sometimes it'd be great drummers would show up. And so we do the sound check and say, hey, you want to play the sound check, right? So the guy gets up, plays the sound check. we would play the Floyd tunes because that's what we would sound check to.
Yep.
But I was so surprised that even a lot of these really good drummers, it just didn't feel like Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Right? It was the subtlety of the way Nick played, the what he did for at least some of this music. You could understand what he brought to the party, especially on the old tunes and the stuff that he knew there. Now, some of the newer stuff's a little different because they used different drummers and stuff. On Jeff Porcaro played on that, the same record
Yeah.
on and stuff, right? So yeah, they
And
used different guys. Yeah.
and I think Roger took more creative control of the band, so things got more like focused, not feeling based, right?
Yeah, the whole it just changed, you know. I mean, it's like anything, it evolved, right?
Yeah.
But you know that momentary lapse is a great album, and it really
Yeah.
is. When you listen to it, it's a great album. That's the thing about Floyd. The more it's one of those things you need to listen to multiple times to really start to grasp kind of the genius, the real genius, because it's in the subtleties of the music. It's really, you know, certain things, you know, they have a certain feel to them that just happened at that particular time, or that group of musicians feels things, which makes the whole thing, you know, very,
Yeah. Thanks,
very
Click.
unique. It's a very
Yeah.
unique thing. Yeah.
But Marcos asked beforehand, what was your first impression of Pink Floyd? Like you mentioned it a bit, but uh, when you heard them, when you first played with them, you recorded the solos. What was your impression?
You know, it was interesting because you know, I was going in there with the head to go play, right? To go do a solos, right? And I didn't really think of it too much different than really any kind of recording session in a sense. You know, you get called to go in to do a record or put a solo on something or put some horns on a part. So I just kind of went in with that because I didn't realize who Dave Gilmour was. And I didn't really understand who Bob Ezrin was, you know, the
Yeah,
producer. And I didn't
yeah.
really have anything. And it was funny because actually what was interesting about it was I had just, there was this, all of a sudden there was this whole thing about a saxophone player by the name of David Sanborn that came out. And
Oh,
Dave Sanborn he basically completely, he made me, he changed. I was an alto saxophone player, right? I studied to be I wanted to be an alto saxophone player. And I was listening to every saxophone player out there and stuff. And then that same guy that I told you that told me about Pink Floyd, he was my music buddy. One of my favorite musicians, a guy named Dan Sawyer, incredible musician,
oh,
guitar
that's
player,
sorry.
great guy. He's one of my favorites. Actually, he was my true mentor, I would say. That really got me into the music business and got me going. But oh, now I forgot where I was going with this story. Where was I going?
What was your first impression?
Oh,
You went to the yeah.
yeah. So when I went in there, I know I can't remember what I said. I was going to say, so, oh yeah. So he was saying, same guy, Danny Sawyer, was the one that turned me on. Said, "Oh man, you called me up one night." And he says, "Dude, you got to go get this record." I said, "What is?" It's an album called First Flight, and it's by this guy David Sanborn. So I went to the record store. Remember, like 2:00 in the morning again. Bought the record, came home, threw that record on, and my mouth dropped. I went, "Oh!" I said, "I can't play alto saxophone anymore. I have to
Caiu aqui.
stop." Because he basically defined the genre. He defined alto saxophone. I knew at that moment that everybody was going to start sounding like him and wanting, because he completely took it to the next place. He's probably one of the most unique saxophone players that really just redefined the sound of the alto at a time. And he got that from Hank Crawford, a little bit of it from Hank Crawford, but he took Hank to another spot. But yeah, I heard that record, so I said, "Oh, dude, I can't play alto." I said, so I remember laying there that night in bed thinking, going, "Wow, this is like everybody's going to chase that guy. They're going to sound like him." And I said, you know, it's so funny. I started going, okay, there's Lockjaw Davis. I said, there's jazz guys. Name the jazz guys. I went, there's Lockjaw Davis, Fathead Newman, Fathead, Lockjaw, Ben Webster, Ike Weck, Cannonball, Charlie Parker, blah, blah, blah. I can name all these jazz guys. And then I said, rock and roll. Okay, who is it? Junior Walker, King Curtis. And then it gets real small.
Mm-hmm. It was a career change for you.
There's only a few saxophone players out there that actually really broke that spot. They were all in the pop, and that's when I decided I'm not going to play. I'm gonna play instead of going ba ba da ba ba da ba da ba. I'm gonna go ba 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 ba.
That's great.
Just real dumb and rock and roll. I'm gonna be a rock and roll guy, right? So when I was going out and doing sessions, so gets back to Pink Floyd. I was getting called, so I go to the session, and the first thing they would say is, "Can you sound like this guy, David Sanborn? Can you make it sound like that?" And I would try to emulate him, and I kept hearing myself, and I said, "I sound stupid." Mm-hmm. So I came home, and I was like, "I'm not going to ever do that. Never going to do that again. I'm not. They want to get David Sanborn. Call David Sanborn. It's going to be me, right? I'm going to play.
They better do that,
right?" So when I went into do the Floyd album, it was I had a little bit of an attitude. You get what you get. Don't tell me anything. So I said, don't tell me anything. Just let me play. And I went and I said, top to bottom on 3 tracks. Let me just play. Let's just go. And then we can talk about it afterwards. And it ended up being a part of the Dogs of War solo ended up being the first half of the first take and the second half of the second, because I like to just don't tell me, just point and see what I do at the moment, because that way you're thinking, you're not thinking, right? Because you're not really able to think because you don't know the song. You're just kind of trying to listen to where the chords are going, and then you're trying to see what you feel at that moment and put it down. So I was happy that happened, and they liked it, which was good, because they had to erase a bunch of my favorite saxophone players that they had already brought in to put a solo on the record, but they didn't like them for some reason, and mine stuck, and I got the gig. So I think it was because I'm not too educated. Like, I think that's what they liked about it, is a lot of times guys play too good. Mm-hmm. Right, and it doesn't fit the music quite as right. I'm more of a stylist, I'd say. I have more of a style, and I grunt and groan, and I throw the microphone in the bell of the horn, and I make it all trashy and a little bit punky, and I think that's worked well because it kind of blends in with music that's a little more raw. They want a little bit of a raw feel, right? So I made a living out of that, being raw.
Man, that's one of the greatest stories I've ever heard. That's amazing. That's amazing. Marcos, ele contou uma história muito interessante, que no começo ele não tinha muito essa noção, e ele foi gravar como qualquer sessão de gravação, né? Mas estava acontecendo um contexto muito interessante na época, de um saxofonista que na época lançou um álbum que definiu o estilo, e todo mundo começou a copiar, o Sanborn. E aí, quando meio que chamaram ele foi meio com essa coisa de, todo mundo quer que copie ele, eu não quero copiar, porque não dá para copiar ele e tal. E ele foi com essa atitude meio punk, falar, eu não vou deixar me falar nada, e se me mandar, eu vou mandar para aquele lugar também, vou tocar do meu jeito, e os caras do Floyd adoraram.
Sim, sim. Agora, eu queria falar sobre isso, né? Eu vi que a gravação do álbum The Division Bell, do qual ele não participou, eles tocavam tudo junto no estúdio, todos juntos ao mesmo tempo. Foi assim também no álbum que ele participou?
Ok. Eu acho que não, mas vamos lá. Okay, Scott, Marcus is asking, it's a famous story that the Division Bell, which you didn't take part in, right?
Right.
It was recorded like the full band on studio, like jamming and recording. The recordings you took part in, were they not like that, right? Everyone recorded separated, right?
Oh, yeah, we were all separated. Yeah, the other records. Now they do bring people into track a lot of times, right? So you have a rhythm section, you cut the rhythm section or do it. So they definitely track with guys playing, right? They don't. It's not just like, I go into some things where you'll play to a click and they'll have the drummer come in later. And you're like, that's just so weird to me, because it's like you feed off of the energy of the drums, not just the fact that he's in time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's what we have. Music now has changed so much. It's so mishmashed of stuff. There's just a lot. I mean, a lot of it's amazing, but again, it's kind of soulless. It doesn't have those little mistakes and things in it in the same way that we did back in the day, that really stands the test of time, capturing that specific moment of humans mentally locking in at the same frequency for that one take. Because, you know, even if you think about it, when we used to cut tracks, I would always say, look, let's do 3 takes top to bottom. So the guy put the tape on, and I just say, when we finish at the end, when we get to the end, we just stop, and then I'll count it off again, and we'll start at the top and we'll do it again. And then I'll count it off and let's do it again. So we just 3 top to bottom. We don't stop. We don't listen. We just go for it. Try to muster up that energy, right? Yeah. And what you'll find, which is so fascinating, is you'll find one of them, even though they're like identical, you did them almost just back to back, but one of them, it'll just have this energy because everybody just locked in, and you go, take number 2. That's the one. You don't get that anymore, where it's like you get to play with these other musicians, get it, and then pick that one where you felt it all came together, right? It just, there's something special and magical. And that's why those old records, like the Floyd records and the Stones old records, and, you know, all those classic, you know, real Led Zeppelin, you know, there's a small group. Those records still stand the test of time, right? They just, you can't, every time you hear them, they still feel good, right? They feel good. There's something about them. So
I totally agree.
Different times, for sure.
Yeah. Ele tá dizendo que não. Você tinha, em geral, ele falou muito das bandas que gravavam top to bottom, né? Tipo, gravava a música inteira, todo mundo junto, via qual que era o melhor take e isso ia pro álbum, todo mundo decidia. Mas essas sessões, não. A música do Floyd era um pouco, talvez, mais elaborada. O Ezrin era um produtor mais meticuloso, né? Então gravava separado. Mas você tinha, muitas vezes, a bateria e talvez o baixo alimentando as gravações, porque tudo tem que estar colado com esses dois.
Alinhado com isso, né? Agora, Maurício, se eu não me engano, esse álbum, Momentan, ele foi feito com outro baterista, porque o Nick Mason não acertava o clique. Para ele era muito difícil tocar ouvindo o clique. Isso ocorreu mesmo? Foi outro baterista que gravou as baterias?
Foi, vou perguntar. Marcus is asking about the momentary lapse of reason. Nick Mason couldn't do it, or he didn't want. How was that?
Remember, no, it couldn't do it. You mean couldn't play he didn't play on all the songs, is what you mean?
Yeah, he didn't want to use the clip, like the metronome, something like that. It's what we heard.
Yeah, I wasn't there for a lot of that early stuff, because that's done when they do the rhythm section. I came in and played on top. Right, so I wasn't there for all of it, so I can't give you an accurate exactly what the deal was, but I know there's multiple drummers on that record. Mm-hmm. Depending on the feel they were looking for, and so because I think it was sort of a little different type of a Pink Floyd record, right? Mm-hmm. It had a different feel. It was bringing some more electronica into it, you know, some sequences and things like that weren't around in the old days. You had to play them. So yeah, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't have a lot of information about that.
Ok. Ele tá dizendo que sim, teve vários bateristas, né, que eles queriam sentimentos diferentes, pegadas diferentes, mas ele não tava, ele só colocou por cima depois, então ele não participou totalmente do processo.
Olha, eu já desconfiava disso. Maurício, o que acontece? Quando ele entrou, o Pink Floyd foi de progressivo, foi de psicodélico para progressivo. Então eles queriam uma sonoridade mais cheia, mais preenchida, e para que o show também tivesse essa onda. Parece que a própria energia do Scott Page, né, era característica desse novo som que ele procurava. Eles viram isso nele, falaram assim, não é só a maneira que ele toca, mas toda a atitude tem a ver com essa nova roupagem do Pink Floyd. Eles sentiam isso na presença dos caras, assim?
Legal. Let's go back to that punk attitude you mentioned before.
Uh-huh.
Marcos is saying that when you entered the band, they were transitioning like from psychedelic to a more progressive full sound, right?
A little different.
Uh,
Yeah, using a little more tech. Yes.
yeah, and it showed like at the tours, at the live shows, and your energy like made part of that. When we remember things from the 80s, we get like Gilmore soloing like he's in heaven, and your energy there. Do you think and they caught that energy in you and they said, "Oh yeah, that's the guy we want."
Well, yeah, I think that was the original thinking. Maybe not after a while. Oh, because I jump around a lot, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not shy. I always learned that when it's my turn to play, I put it out there, right? I put
Yeah.
I just go for it, right? I think that was originally the thinking was when they were bringing, because it was kind of the next phase of Pink Floyd, that I heard that was part of it through Bob Ezrin, who was the producer, right? And Bob,
Mhm.
I had a business with Bob. Bob is a real good friend, and he mentioned to me one time that that's what they were kind of looking for, is something to kind of take it a little bit. Because when you look at Floyd, they're not real show business, right? They just
Mhm.
play their instruments. The show is the lights and the sound and everything else. It's not them jumping around doing splits and flipping guitars in the air and playing with their teeth. They don't do any of that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I brought a little bit of something that was a little different, a different kind of an energy, I think, to what it was when it was my turn to play, right? I had that. So, I think they liked it. I don't know if they liked. I know some. I mean, there's clearly some people loved it. I mean, I got incredible
Mhm.
things. Some people said, you're like we like Dick much better. And I get it. I get it. It's like, there's certain things. But what was
You,
good though is I got to
you,
wear my own clothes. And what I mean
oh,
by that is they let me play my own solos. So
oh,
Dave never ever said, play this solo or listen to Dick, learn that, play it to copy it. Never. Just play what you want. So it was nice because you've got some of the early ones with Dick Perry on them, and then you got the later ones with me on it. So it's kind of fun to, when you listen to his version of Money and you listen to my version of Money, it's not the same, right? They're totally,
yeah.
solos are different, and same with pretty much all of it. I would always do a nod. I would do a little piece of the solos because I wanted people to feel that I was getting into them, the parts that somebody could recognize. Because that's what I learned from Gilmore, the master of melody. He's the guy that makes he really thinks through the melodies, and they're very musical in the sense that anybody can follow. The people can follow. You don't have to be a musician. Just an average, listener can like, oh, I like that solo because it's musical. It follows
Mhm.
something they can comprehend. I always say when you listen to Comfortably Numb, if you imagine Comfortably Numb, that first guitar solo, if you took that out, it'd be like taking a verse out of the song. Like
Yeah.
there's no voice. It's so recognizable of a solo. Everybody feels it. They want to hear it, right? So, that's always important to me. So I try to take that same approach, and that's right. I mean, I got a lot from Gilmore in that because he would show me how you could knock an audience out with not even playing, leaving the space between the notes, right? The space between the notes. So yeah, he taught me a lot. There's no question. But I also learned too, man. It's like when it's my turn to play, it's like you got to stick it out there. I learned that from a guy by the name of Michael Smotherman. Real quick story.
Smother.
Michael Smotherman was considered, I believe, one of the great American songwriters. I
Mm.
got lucky to be in his band early on in the days in the I guess it was 70s, late 70s
Which
sometime.
band was that?
Michael Smotherman. He was an artist, incredible songwriter. They thought he was going to be the next Elvis, and at that time he had gotten his first. He had gotten the biggest record deal, the biggest advanced record deal for an independent artist at that time. It was like a stupid amount of money they paid him to put him on Elektra. I think it was Elektra. It was Elektra. I can't remember which label it was, but one of the labels. And uh, we became friends, and I used to have a studio I had a 8-track studio in my house at the time, or 8-track or 60, I can't remember what I had, but I had a studio in my house, and he came over and we'd write songs, and we wrote all summer long. Every day we wrote and recorded, and we created a thing called Tune a Day. We'd write a tune and finish it every day, because we just have everything plugged into the studio. We'd write the song, finish it, move on to the next song. Well, one night we're sitting there. Now, look, first, Michael Smotherman was one of the most charismatic artists I'd ever seen. When he walked into the room, when he started to sing, the whole room would listen to him. He was like, he just owned the stage. He had magnetism, and everything about him, he commanded it, right? And I was always so blown away with him because he could do that. So one night we're recording, right? We've been recording all night. We're sitting out by the pool, smoking a fatty. We're sitting, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. We just finished recording all day.
Uh-huh.
And he goes, Scott, he says, every time you pick up your instrument, he says, I don't care if you're just picking it up to practice. I don't care if you're going to play a wedding, a bar mitzvah, a club gig, whatever it is. Every time you pick up your horn, he says, you know what? You got to play like you got a big dick. and that was one of the most profound statements I ever heard. It changed my life, because he was right. Because he says every time, so you'll see, for me, every time it's my turn to play, man, good notes, because he said it doesn't matter if you play right notes, wrong notes, whatever you play, it doesn't matter. It's what you say. It's the energy that you're putting out is more important than what you're actually playing, right? And that stuck in my head so much, and I realized by watching him how he owned it, so I started taking that same approach. That it was my turn to play, I always step forward, because you'll all see too. It's like with Gilmore, it was my turn. I always make sure if his toes are on the edge of the stage, I make sure my toes are hanging over the stage. I want to make sure that I'm out in front, right? Not because of anything, but just it's all about how do you excite an audience? How do you bring people in? How do you capture people, right? So, it's interesting that statement is a very profound one, because it's the most important thing to a musician. And it goes back to where I said wearing your own clothes, right? Wearing something.
And you went full circle. You got to play like you have a big dick and you were chasing girls, so everything's in place.
Sorry, hope I didn't offend people out there in YouTube land, or wherever they are.
That's amazing. Marcos, ele contou que sim, tinha um pouco essa história da energia, né? O Edwin, o produtor, que é muito amigo dele, eu não sabia, depois eu vou perguntar mais, sabe? Mas que ele queria levar isso, porque o Floyd não tinha tanto essa coisa, né? Ele menciona, né, dos guitarristas que tocam flash e os vocalistas que pulam e abrem as pernas, meio Van Halen, né? E ele levou essa energia para a banda. E ele contou essa história desse artista, né, que para ele era um dos caras mais carismáticos dos anos 70, que ele tocou na banda, e que ele falou isso, né, uma vez gravando, 4 horas da manhã, o cara fala para ele, olha, Scott, sempre que você estiver tocando, seja num casamento, num bar mitzvah, em qualquer lugar, qualquer instrumento, você tem que tocar como se você tivesse uma ferramenta bem grande. E é isso, ele pegou isso, ele achou isso muito profundo e levou para a carreira dele.
Tá certo. Agora, Maurício, deixa eu te falar, assim como Bob Daisley, que a gente entrevistou, chegou num momento muito crucial da carreira do Ozzy, que é aquele momento de se reafirmar, não só para o mercado, né, para o mercado da música, para a ex-banda, né, no caso. Quando ele surgiu no Pink Floyd, o Pink Floyd tinha terminado ali sua parceria com o Roger Waters. Ele fez um trabalho tão bem feito, né? Assim, foi um trabalho tão bem feito, que o pessoal, a mídia e todo mundo colocou até o Roger Waters ali de escanteio, cara, de tanto que o Pink Floyd ficou grandioso. Pergunta para ele se a banda tentava reafirmar isso o tempo todo, lembrando que eles tinham que continuar grandes e que tinha que ser maior que o Waters. Tinha essa gana, ele sentia isso ali da tríade ali dos caras.
Uhum. Eu acho que ele fez parte, o Momentary é um álbum do Roger, né? Mas eu vou perguntar dessa questão da transição.
Sim.
Scott, we recently interviewed Bob Daisley from Ozzy Osbourne and many
Ozzy.
other bands. Do you
Oh
know
man,
him?
I do. Yeah, actually a little bit. I actually did the Moscow Music Peace Festival, and I was in the All Star band. Ozzy was one of it. Was Ozzy, Bon Jovi, Scorpions, Skid
Mm.
Row, Cinderella, and some Russian bands. It was called the Moscow Music Peace Festival. You can look it up. It was a kind of a deal. But Ozzy was part of that whole thing, and I was a. And my thing is, I was kind of an wanted to be a director producer, so I was an amateur photographer, videographer, and I shot like
Oh,
I knew how to shoot, right? So when we went and did the Moscow Music Peace Festival, Wayne Isham and Kurt Marvis, who were my friends, their company was called The Company. They were hired to be the video company to film the Moscow Music Peace Festival and shoot, do a live broadcast, stream to all the countries. It was a big thing. Moscow and U.S. bands all coming together for this big event, right? So they knew I was there, and I was coming for the Moscow for the Peace Festival and play with All Star Band. So they asked me, "Oh, would you shoot camera?" Because I'm backstage with all the band guys all the time, right? Because I had back
uh-huh.
music guy, right? So I filmed and everything. Well, one of my assignments was to hang out and film Ozzy. So I followed Ozzy all over for like 3 days in Moscow. And,
That's
got to know
crazy.
him pretty good. And then I
Uma
played with
história
him.
boa com ela.
Yeah, I played with him a couple times here in Los Angeles. He came to our gigs at a place called Madame Wong's. Madame Wong's,
Mhm.
a Hollywood nightclub back in the day, and Ozzy used to come in and he'd sit in with us and play. So I know him a little bit. I don't know. I couldn't say I know him real well, but I know him a little bit.
Yeah, Bob is a very nice guy, and we interviewed him for like an hour and a half. And but Marcus asked, I mentioned him because Bobby took part in like the transition of Ozzy's career from Black Sabbath to solo career, right?
Right.
And then the fatality of Randy Rhoads dying on the plane accident. And so we asked him, Bobby, you made part of all this like solidification as a myth, as a solo artist, and then the reimagination of the band without Randy Rhoads. And you took part of something like that because you were on that period when Roger Waters took control of the band, and then
Right.
he went away, and the triad, Nick and Dave, and they
Yep.
took creative control. How was that period? Like the shifting in ambitions, like did they think we have to keep it big, or how was that period?
I mean, keep it big. I mean, essential. It was fascinating because again, I was into production pretty heavily. So when I got to see the size of this, we fly. We built we did our rehearsed in Toronto in a airplane hangar out on the tarmac of the Toronto airport. They used to have to shuttle us out to the airport hangar in between 747s going down the freaking thing. But yeah, it was very interesting because I remember going in there and I could not believe I'm seeing freaking flying pigs and beds, all this big, massive lighting system, the biggest thing that you could ever imagine. I mean, my mind was blown. It was crazy. By the way, my camera's getting low, my battery. Let me just push my button here on my thing to get me.
Okay, okay,
I got to get my battery here going. I think I can get to it.
okay. I have lighting problems here as well.
Okay, I think I got my battery on. I'm hoping. Anyway, if I die, we're done. But hopefully it came on. Let me look here. I can look real quick. Oh,
Okay,
no, I can't tell. I can't tell. All right, we'll just go until we stop. Hopefully it won't
okay.
go. Yeah, so we were rehearsing there. So it was like it was a very interesting time because obviously it was a transition. Dave was taking control kind of the creative along with Rick and Nick. Mostly Dave, I would say, was really driving in a sense the overall production and stuff. And then obviously they brought Bob Ezrin back in to help out put the events and the shows and stuff on. But yeah, there was, it was this was Dave's coming out as the new Pink Floyd. So it was pretty interesting to be part of that transition, right? Because they didn't know how well the tours were going to do. They didn't know. They hadn't been out. They hadn't done anything in a long time. They didn't know because of Roger not being there what was happening. And so, it turned out pretty well. We went around the world, sold out everywhere a couple times. So it was a good ride. 199 shows. It was crazy.
Ele falou que foi uma época que sim, teve a transição. Ele contou uma história interessantíssima de um show em Moscou com Superstars, né? E que ele participa da produção também, da filmagem, e ele ficou encarregado de seguir o Ozzy, né? Imagina a loucura que foi. E aí ele conheceu um pouco o Bob ali, mas não muito, né? Mas ele disse que sim, tudo era muito grande no Pink Floyd. Ele sempre participou da produção dos shows, né? E tudo tinha os porcos voadores, tinha os sistemas de som. E na época não havia muita preocupação, não. O Dave estava assumindo o controle criativo e estava todo mundo muito tranquilo. O Bob Ezrin voltou para a produção na época, então foi tranquilo. Não teve. Eles fizeram uma tour sem o Roger e funcionou e estava tudo leve e foi isso. Não teve grandes dramas, não.
Ah, que legal. Maurício, agora eu quero saber de um lado mais legal do Scott. Que, assim, eu gostaria que o público todo tivesse acesso a isso, cara, que ele é um cara que trabalhou muito com caridade, e ele chegou a trabalhar até com Circo de Solé. Vamos perguntar para ele como é que é essa atuação dele nessa área, né?
Certo. Okay, now we want to know more about you, Scott. Marcos mentioned that you work with a lot of charities, right? And we want to know about it, and your work with Cirque du Soleil, and some other things that you're doing that you want to do, like what's in your heart?
Well, yeah,
what do you do?
Yes, just so my career has really been around. I'm a technologist, right? So I've launched multiple companies. I'm considered kind of a serial entrepreneur. I'm on my 4th company right now. I've got quite a few projects all around Web3, NFTs, meme tokens, all crypto in general. I mean, that's my world, is that space. And so I do a lot of projects in the Web3 space right now. I have one that's actually very interesting, which is kind of cool. I was picked as one of the 222 artists to put their works on this special hard drive that was designed to last 1 billion years under any weather conditions. And it was put onto an Elon Musk Falcon 9 spaceship with the lunar lander called the Odysseus lunar lander. It landed on the moon on February 22nd. Of this year, 2024. First time in 50 years we've had supposedly anything on the moon. I still kind of question that moonwalk, but that's the original one in 50 years ago. Because after seeing how hard it was to land this thing on the moon with all our technology, it's a little bit. I'm wondering how this worked. But anyway, we landed, put this up. So I have a project called My Moon EXP. I put 7,000 digital twins. I actually put Pink Floyd on the moon. So they're on the actual moon now. I'm not even sure they even know it yet. I'm sure they're going to find out soon because I'm starting to talk about it. I've created a project called it's called My Moon EXP, which is an exhibit that I'm putting together to show all the pieces I put on the moon. So I put up all my Pink Floyd photos and videos, over 130 hours of video of Pink Floyd. I put all my Supertramp, Toto, my meetings with Lady Diana and Charles, for the Royals. I had a business with Quincy Jones called QD7. I put stuff up. So I put all these things, and I created a project called it's called The Golden Mullet. And The Golden Mullet, you can go see it at mymoonexp.com. mymoonexp.com. You can look at The Golden Mullet, and you'll see it's a picture of me from the side, and it's my golden mullet. And what that piece does is it actually is made with 7,000 individual files that I put on the moon. So It's actually made. So it's an artwork that's made with that, but it's a business model that has a DeFi, a decentralized finance business model, and a circular economy based on NFTs and tokens. I know this gets a little complex for those out there. I'm sorry, but it's a new business model that is built on top of this project, and that's just launching. The Golden Mullet, it was at Bitcoin 2024 this year. I was just at Art Basel, where it was introduced there at Art Basel in Miami, and then it went to Tulum Crypto Fest, and now it's getting ready to go to Mexico City. and stuff. And it's a whole project, but that project, you can read a little bit about it there at my Moon EXP. And so my whole thing is building businesses now on top of these tokens. And I'm using this particular project to push, to basically show people how tokenomics work. I also am partners and one of the co-founders of a company of an NFT project called Synthtopia. And you can go to synthtopia.world. That's synthtopia.world. And you can read about that. And we just sold our 4th collection of 9,000 pieces out NFT project. And it's a distributed media franchise, and people are building on top of that. All new media stuff. It's also tied into my Moon EXP project. So it's all this NFT, new media, Web3. That's what I do. I speak at conferences. I've been spoke at ETH Toronto. I was in Belgrade for the Tomorrow Conference, Dubai for Jai Tech, all over the United States, Seattle, New York. So I'm a speaker, and I teach. Basically, I'm teaching people how to use Web3 as the next thing, because basically tokens, NFTs are about to eat the world. So this project is also a project that I'm putting out into the world, and it's a fascinating art project and business model. So that's what I'm doing right now.
That's so amazing, man. I've worked with crypto already at a financier in Brazil, and I have a AI digital agency at the moment, and that's amazing. Glad to know.
That's good to know, because you should go look at synthtopia.world, because it's all AI. We designed it that way. The whole thing is AI, and it's all designed to, basically the story is that to get out of the matrix, you got to be in the matrix. So we're in the matrix, but we're really trying to get people to learn how to free think and get out of being the algorithms, right? And be able to look at the world from a reality point of view, a more conscious point of view, less of the other. But it's a fascinating project. We're getting ready to launch our biosynth token also, which is coming out, right? Yeah. And then I'm also part of a food franchise out of Australia called Shiba Wings. And Shiba Inu, the Shiba logo, right? The little dog for Shiba crypto, right? Well, we own that logo. That's ours. We actually own the logo, and we have a food franchise called Shiba Wings. It's the first crypto diner in Australia. We're just launching our second ghost kitchen, and it's a whole DeFi product. And this week, we're actually moving our token over to Solana, coming up here in the next week. And that's a whole other long story, but that's like it's out of the music business now. This is more about new business models built on top of tokens, and
That's amazing. I'll certainly want to talk with you after that about all that stuff.
Yeah.
Marcos, ele falou de vários projetos. Hoje ele gera negócios, tem várias empresas, principalmente na área de tokens, cripto, inteligência artificial.
Tecnologia, né? Eu vi isso.
E esse projeto incrível, né, dos arquivos do Pink Floyd, Toto, Supertramp, todos foram para a Lua com a Falcon do Elon Musk, né? E estão pousando agora dia 22 ou 24.
Ele está trabalhando com o Elon Musk?
Não, ele mandou os arquivos na Falcon, que vai pousar lá, né? Uma coisa incrível, né? Outra categoria.
Cara, a gente vai ter que escrever sobre isso, meu.
Com certeza. Né? Nothing better than to land on the moon, on the bright side of the moon, listening to some Pink Floyd and your sax, man.
I put it on I wrote actually on the golden mullet. It says, because it's a big physical painting too. It's a beautiful physical piece. And at the bottom, I wrote on the right side of the moon. So I put
on the right side. Amazing, man.
Actually, on the dark side too. Yeah. So yeah, it's the first time.
First time.
First time anybody's been up there. It's actually a big honor out of 8 billion people to be one of less than 200 people that have put their stuff on the moon.
Sure, amazing. Really amazing, man. Marcos, quer perguntar mais alguma coisa?
Bom, ele falou que só tinha 1 hora de live, então já chegamos nesse final. Só fala com ele que a gente vai fazer um especial na rádio e vamos pedir o apoio dele para a gente montar o melhor set para fazer esse programa especial, né? Pro Scott Page, né?
Scott, we reached the 1 hour mark that we previously agreed to, and we are very honored to talk to you. It was probably one of the funniest things I've done this year or last year. Yeah, great, man. Great talking to you.
Before you go.
Yeah.
We'll play a song.
Oh
man.
Yeah.
Oh, good, man. Thank you. That's great.
Amazing. Friends out there.
Thank you.
It's gonna be on our highlights for the live. Scott, since you've done that for us, very amazing. Look, I'm here. Look.
All right.
Amazing. We have a special on the radio. It's called Legends Radar, you know?
Okay.
And we play 18 songs from someone we interview or someone we want to like. And we want you to choose the first song and the last song of this 18 song selection. Songs that you've played in.
Gosh. I mean, obviously, let's just go off of let's say Dogs of War. Let's just do the Dogs of War, and let's do the Delicate Sound of Thunder, Money.
Good moves.
Money, the version from Delicate.
Yeah, from Delicate Sound of Thunder, those two, Money, and we'll do Dogs of War. There you go.
Amazing. Yes. It's gonna air on Saturday, probably.
Perfect.
Thanks again, man. Amazing talking to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All my Brazilian pals. If I get over there, we got to hang, right?
You have a lot of fans here. Rest assured.
All right, great. Thank you for having me on your show. Really appreciate it, man. Getting here to chat with you guys. And, it was fun. We got to reminisce, go back to the old days. It's fun.
Yeah.
Man. Good times. All right, well, let's
Thank
stay
you
in
for
touch.
your time.
We're connected online now, so we'll be in touch. And thank you again. And have a good one.
Thank you. Have a nice. You're gonna spend the night, right? So.
All right. I gotta go, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Maurício, o que foi isso, cara?
Eu tô meio bobo. O inglês fugiu de mim.
Não, cara, ele é fantástico. Que figuraça. Não, ele tocar sax no final ali foi ótimo, bicho. Caramba.
Ele tocando e
Caramba, é muito legal, velho. O que você mostrou pra ele, pô? Oh.
Não, é que eu tava arrepiando aqui com ele tocando sax.
Esse cara foi muito legal, velho. Putz, o cara é muito massa. Caramba.
Muito bom.
Caramba. Ele falou assim, quanto tempo vai demorar? Eu falei, são uns 40 minutos. Eu tenho compromisso daqui 1 hora, né, tal. Aí na hora que deu, tipo, 9:01, eu falei, pô, deve estar esgotando. Porque senão o cara acaba falando também que tem compromisso, né, tal. Mas, cara, parece que ele tava feliz pra caramba, não parece?
Nossa, ele falou tanta coisa. Assim, eu dei uma resumida, muito resumida, porque ele vai para uma história, ele volta, ele é sensacional, ele tem um timing de contar as coisas que é sensacional.
A mente dele é acelerada, velho. Esse cara não é comum, não.
Não, muito bom, cara, genial.
E vem cá, ele falou que trabalhou agora, ele trabalha com tecnologia, né? Deu para entender isso aí. E ele, cara, ele tá mandando as músicas do Pink Floyd pro espaço, cara. Que loucura é essa, mano?
Então, ele trabalha com tecnologia, ele é um palestrante, tem um projeto dele que eu vou ver depois, você precisa pegar certinho com ele, você que tem um e-mail aí.
Legal isso.
Ele trabalha com cripto, ele ensina as pessoas a usar a economia nova, digital, ele trabalha com inteligência artificial. Esse projeto dele, o Synth, né, para tirar as pessoas dos algoritmos, né? Para você fazer a sua seleção, você usar a internet de uma maneira melhor, né? Então, é um cara muito assim, tipo, a música serviu para ele ama tudo, mas hoje ele lida com tecnologia e novos negócios. Ele tem uma rede de comida na Austrália, com uma logo que tá em NFT, só doideira.
Que louco, velho. Pô, o cara é inteligente pra caramba. E Maurício, eu fiquei de cara, porque eu mandei a mensagem pra ele, aí tipo, passou 5 minutos e ele respondeu, cara. Falei, caramba, por que eu não tinha convidado esse cara antes, bicho? Porra, assim, sabe? Tá. E aí, tipo assim, não, quero fazer assim, vamos pra cima. Eu falei, caramba, velho. Que louco.
Genial. O cara é sensacional, eu ri demais.
Colocaram ele pra tomar conta do Ozzy, um festival? Como é que foi essa história aí, mano?
É um festival em Moscou, tipo, bandas americanas com bandas russas, aquela coisa meio fim de Guerra Fria e tal, né?
Sim.
E ele tava meio na produção, fazendo os vídeos, né, videomaker e tal, e produção de palco também. E aí falou, não, sua atribuição é gravar o Ozzy. E ele ficou 3, 4 dias atrás do Ozzy naquela doideira da vida da banda do Ozzy.
Deus, no babado Ozzy lá, bicho.
Não foi babá, mas tipo, acho que deve ter gravado coisa que não devia a rodo.
Ah, caramba, bicho. E teve uma hora lá que ele falou de smoking, né? Smoking woman. Como é que foi essa história aí, velho?
Cara, ele falou muita coisa, que hora que foi?
Teve uma hora que ele falou assim, ele ficava o tempo todo smoking, aí fumava tal, e dava uma onda. Acho que ele falou algo assim, cara.
Não peguei. Ele falou muito do Have a Cigar, né, da música, né, do Pink Floyd. Cara, não teve nenhum contexto, não. O negócio dele era curtir e pegar mulher, e aí que ele virou músico, né? Ele falou que ele começou a aprender a tocar. Ele começou a aprender a tocar quando o Toto chamou ele, que eram os amigos dele, eram os heróis dele e tal. O Jeff Beccari, o melhor batera que ele já viu e tal. Sim. E ele tocava no Supertramp e tal, mas não era muito sério. Quando o Toto falou, não, agora eu tenho que fazer bonito pros meus brothers.
Engraçado que ele falou uma coisa que é mó tabu. Segundo, né, o pessoal fala que o baterista do Pink Floyd participou do primeiro até o último álbum. Só que dizem que nesse álbum que ele participou, o Nick Mason não fez porque tinha que ser tudo clicado. O Nick Mason, aquele clique no ouvido, ele não conseguia acompanhar. O Nick Mason é um cara que sempre tocou muito livre, ele chama a bateria dele de arranjo espacial, sabe? Até, tipo assim, é um termo que eles usam porque... Então o que acontece? Quando colocaram ele nessa coisa de tem que ser clicado, ele não conseguiu, literalmente. Aí ele ainda falou, foram vários bateristas, eu achei que tinha chamado um cara só. Aí ele ainda falou que...
Foram vários. O Nick tocou um pouco, mas é isso, né, que ele até comenta antes, quando ele tá falando do Toto, né, que o Jeff Beccari também tinha essa coisa um pouco mais livre, não era no metrônomo, né, e ele tocou a vida inteira com metrônomo, então quando ele foi pro Toto, ele teve que abandonar isso, né, eu até brinquei, já era uma preparação pro Nick Mason, né, ele deu uma risada, falou, porque o Nick aí era totalmente no feeling, né, ele batia na hora que ele achava que ele tinha que bater, e se ele achasse que não tinha que bater, ele não batia também.
Não batia, sim. Bem por aí.
E esse álbum teve um pouco mais de eletrônico, e o Nick não pegou o feeling tanto.
Foi genial, cara, que fantástico falar com ele. Engraçado que ele falou da música Dogs of War, ele faz um solo de sax nessa música. É como se dissesse pra ele assim, cara, agora você tem que mostrar que você é o maioral, que só pode, cara. Ele fez um solo de sax, cara, que na minha opinião é um dos melhores solos de sax que eu já vi até hoje, né? E tudo. Sim. Foi muito legal.
E é isso, é a música que inicia pra ele, o nosso set vai ser Dogs of War, ele quer que feche com a Money do Delicate Sound of Thunder.
Maravilha, é um cara fantástico. Maurício, obrigado, cara, foi maravilhoso, né? Foi maravilhoso. Beleza. Então vamos seguir, cara. Deu certo. Deus, oh Deus.
Deu.
Obrigado, viu, Maurício?
E aí, sempre um prazer.
Valeu, irmão. Tamo junto.
Abraço.
Abraço. É isso aí.